All right, today it is ubiquitous that we are using mobile phones. Without our mobile phone, we'd be lost. I mean, we do so much with these things, but the question is, where are we going with them? What's going to be the application? What will be driving that 5 years from now? And that's what our next speaker will be addressing. We're going to be looking at all kinds of things about the speed, the weight, applications, and particularly the disruption that is happening with mobile devices. And your speaker is a person who has worked extensively with technologies on mobile in many other areas as well. He hails from Austin, Texas, and he's here now with a message you want to find out about. Brett Tabke. Join me in welcoming Brett Tabke now.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Got my hands full here, so I guess I'll start at the mic. Yeah, no, I was just, is that clicker the right clicker? I saw one back there and I grabbed it. How you doing? Well, thankfully I'm not the last guy in between you and the bar tonight. You never want to be that guy. So, yeah, my name's Brett Tabke. I run PUBCON Internet Marketing Conference. I've been in tech since, well, the first time I touched a computer was in 1970, it was in my high school guidance counselor's office. It was this big line printer. And he said we were going to look up career information. Well, I was a sophomore in high school. I had no clue what I wanted to do. He said, yeah. I said, man, this thing's big. It must have a lot of storage. And he says, well, it doesn't have any storage. It uses a thing to talk over the phone lines. I go, talk over the phone lines? Computers talk over the phone lines? Didn't hear a thing else he had to say, so the first thing I looked up was how do computers talk over phone lines, and that was the start of my computer career, really. So currently, like I said, I run PUBCON Internet Marketing Show. It's like 10 tracks wide, 4 days, 3,000 people, like 60 trade show booths, 200 speakers, over 150 breakout sessions, 8 keynotes, and somebody figured up the other day 8 kegs of beer. So, and that's important because we actually started in a pub in London in 2000. Somebody on our website said, hey, I'm going to London for a little vacation. Who wants to get together for a beer? Well, 150 people showed up for a pint on a Saturday afternoon, and they said, this is a conference. I said, no, it's a pub conference. So that's where the name PUBCON came from. It's a conference in a bar. And then every time we held one every year, we just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And now we're doing 2-3 times a year. And, there we go. Before that, I ran Webmaster World. Webmaster World was one of the largest forums on the web for many years. We regularly did 1 million page views a day back in the day from 2000 to like 2010. We're mostly known as a search engine optimization place where people came to talk about SEO, the search engines, Google. We're probably most famous for being a place where the reps would come from Yahoo, Alta Vista. Most famously, a guy named Google Guy used to come to Webmaster World all the time, a.k.a. Matt Cutts. Matt is no longer at Google, but he was kind of the Google outreach guy. Matt's now working for the government in charge of U.S. Digital Services, the group that saved healthcare.gov. So, and if you know anything about SEO, we were the only forum on the web to be a PR9. So I sold Webmaster World in 2012. Going back many a year before that, I was the online community director for Gateway 2000 in North Sioux City, Iowa. We ran 24-line, 48-line in the early 90s BBSs so that people could dial up and download drivers for their computers. For that, I ran bulletin board systems all through the 80s, part of the 90s. The first time I saw an online forum, I went, that's nothing but a poorly implemented BBS. And that's where I started Webmaster World. It was about 1996 was the first thought to start something like that, to grow into a huge community of hundreds of thousands of members. So I still owe it all to the Commodore 64. I worked during the summers while I was going to CU. I worked at Colorado Commodore Connection in Aurora, just south of old Stapleton Airport. One day a guy came in. We did nothing but repair Commodore stuff, all the big old stuff, PETs and all the 64-line and 128. And guy come in one day with a program and wanted somebody to fix it. Well, I was the only one that knew programming at the time, and I said I'd take a look at it, and I looked at it, and it was just completely bug-laden. It didn't work, didn't do what it was supposed to. So I sat down, and in about 4 hours, I rewrote it from scratch, And he goes, I paid $25,000 for that program. I said, I'd take $25K for it. And well, we sit down and we negotiated, and he paid me half of that to build him a system with hardware. So I built him a Commodore 64 with a drive and everything and the software, and that ran the flight monitor system at the Aspen airport. So they flew me up here to install it and put it in, and that was my first paid professional gig. So it's nice to be back. I hope this isn't the end of my career. This is the start of my career. So big on the 64. I wrote all kinds of assemblers. I was a machine language programmer in the 80s. I got programs in the Canadian Hall of Fame. I wrote the Programmer's Guide to the 65C816 chip for the Western Digital Company. That's the chip that was in the Apple II GS, and I worked on a whole bunch of graphics routines for them. Wrote primer after primer after primer about the 65C816 because we thought Commodore was going to produce a 65C816 chip. And having lived in Colorado for at least 10 years. I'm a rabid Broncos fan. I'm down in Austin, Texas now, where it's nothing but Texans and Cowboys. So anytime the Broncos beat the Cowboys, the Broncos beat the Cowboys, it's a good day. So, and boy, did they look good. Any Bronco fans? Any Bronco fans? Oh, yeah. Buy me a beer later, we'll talk. So, all right, I'm going to talk a little bit about tech adoption and how mobile is going to go over 3 to 5 years. I don't want to get out there too far. I got a good friend, I hate to name drop, but he's a dear friend, Ray Kurzweil. And if you've read Ray's stuff, I mean, it's out there. And that's a whole different level of being able to predict what's coming up in the future. I look out 3 to 5 years. I know what's coming. I see all the, I read constantly. 3 to 6 hours a day I read news and tech news. I just absorb it. I'm an investor in a lot of startups, and so I read constantly. And part of that comes from this chart. This is the chart most VCs use, you know, the tech adoption style cycle, excuse me. And they get really detailed about this thing, where in the cycle you think an adoption rate is. You know, we just heard about VR. Where is VR in this chart? You know, we had VR clear back in the 80s. If you've seen those archaic pictures of the guys wearing the big old helmets, it's like something out of a sci-fi movie. In the 90s, we had VR again, but the hardware wasn't ready and the screens weren't ready. And now we've got VR that kind of looks like the hardware is ready, kind of looks like the software is ready, but there's still not mass adoption. So I kind of wonder where we are on VR, and I really wonder where we are on Bitcoin. Where are we on the adoption of cryptocurrency? Have we gone over the trough, or have we gone over the top, the hype cycle? Are we now kind of down at the bottom where people are thinking it's real, it's here to stay? I wonder where we are in that cycle. So I'm going to talk a lot about that today, where we're going. And the best way to set that up is kind of to look at where mobile's kind of going to be the focus today. This is a chart from ComScore. I got like 3 or 4 that really set the backdrop of where we are today. When we think about usage, red is women, blue is men. The biggest one to look at is this little guy here in the middle. That's the 18 to 24-year-old age group. Look at that, 22% of women, 18 to 24, their only method onto the web is the phone. That's the only internet usage they have is the phone. And this was late last year. It's gone up a few percentage points since then. So that's kind of the future. It continues to grow, continues to be phone focused. ComScore just boiled it down simply. They said the U.S. smartphone market is nearing saturation. While mobile now dominates digital media usage, consumption is beginning to stabilize, and the days of huge growth are over. Digital media audiences are in the latter stages of a multi-year boom. So the hardware's set. What we can do with the hardware is still questionable, but the mass adoption rate is over. This is a chart of what are the top operating systems going on in mobile right now. Down on bottom is Android, iPhone, and then everybody else at the top. It's kind of a sad news for everybody else, you know, Microsoft and that could have happened, you know, with Nokia. This is just iPhone. You look at the adoption rate. This was early this year in January. This was taken. ComScore gets their data from ISPs. They're one of these people who go out and buy massive quantities of data from ISPs, what people are surfing on. And, you know, in March, our government passed a little bill to allow ISPs to sell all that data willy-nilly without telling you. So this data is probably going to adjust a little bit. Basically, the only thing to take away from it is the iPhone 7 was not massively adopted. There was not a mass upgrade cycle on the iPhone 7. There were more people running the 5s than there were the 7s. This shows the amount of time people are spending on the internet versus on the internet in an app. Orange is in an app. Blue is on a desktop. So what it's saying here is people, when they get on an app, get on social media, 60% of the time they prefer an app to the web. Web usage, app usage continues to grow, and it's almost exclusively on mobile. So let's talk hardware. Talk to kind of a backdrop a little bit. Where are we going 5 years from now? Clearly, much more complicated, complex chips are in the works right now. AMD says they'll have a 34-core chip within a year. The most important thing about it is they're figuring out how to slice these chips. The problem with adding more cores is they use so much more memory. I mean, so much more power. They're just power hungry the more cores you get. But Intel and AMD are working on two different models. Intel has advanced frequency scaling where half the chip runs at one clock rate and the rest of the chip runs lower. So stuff in the background may run at 500 megahertz while stuff in the foreground could run all the way up to 3 gig in the near future. And AMD has a heterogeneous multiprocessing unit where every core can run its own speed and every core can be different. So it's not the same core. It's not just core sliced. It can be an older model, much less capable, that'll handle background stuff. So storage, we all know that it just continues. It's an inexorable march forward on storage. Right now, the state of the art in a micro SD is 400 gig and a terabyte on an SD card. Boy, Western Digital says it's time to prepare for another, order of magnitude leap with things like Intel's 3D X-point storage and AMD's 3D NAND storage. The X-point storage is over 1,000 times faster than standard SD. It's almost near DRAM speed, meaning we'll eliminate this barrier between DRAM and SD storage. And who knows, in 5 years, we may have a terabyte of main system RAM on a phone and be more power sipping than what we have now. So clearly it's going to continue to increase by leaps and bounds. And again, both AMD and Western Digital say that with this 3D storage, basically what it is being able to grow chips almost exponentially. They just keep layering this stuff on top of one another. They don't have to grow outward to take up more real estate. Some of the other hardware advances, transflective display. A current display, LCD display or OLED display at top generally reflects sunlight straight back to your eye. If you've got a backlit display like most of ours are, it still reflects back to your eye. With a transflective display, they grow the crystals differently so it's not shiny, it absorbs all the light so you can use it in daylight. It's just as bright in daylight as it is at night. It's amazing, except for it's kind of expensive to build. They're running into problems. Another one they're working on is the hydrogen fuel cell. This came out almost 10 years ago, and everybody came like, well, it's just too expensive. And who wants to replace a fuel cell on their phone every week, And I thought the same until last year when Apple put $50 million into a company producing these. So maybe there's a future there. I don't know. It's kind of the HP model where they want to sell you the stick. So there's a long-term play for long-term supply profit there. Let's move on. Another big thing coming, Hotspot 2.0. Hotspot 2.0 is a standard that's going to be baked into new routers, new antennas. The standard allows for seamlessly transferring between hotspots. Basically the same way your cell phone network works now. Hotspot 2.0 will work that way. Ton of hardware coming out about it. In order to run a Hotspot 2.0, you have to join the consortium. So there'll be an opportunity to walk down the street, you connect to the Starbucks, you walk down a little farther, you connect to the Albertsons Wi-Fi, and all along that way, you pay a monthly fee of, say, $30. A penny goes to Starbucks for your usage, 2 pennies to Albertsons for your usage, to the next one. Ton of hardware coming out about this, and it's all standardized, so that's great. Biosensors, clearly biosensors, you know, between Apple and Samsung, they both released phones that read your eyes and your face, and they know who you are, so sensors continue to increase, especially medical sensors. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. Wearable tech, you know, guys all day have been mentioning wearable tech embedded in everything. And the last one, the difference between a photo and a video, I think is going to blur. What was it, 2 phones ago, Apple introduced the take the 15 frames before you take a shot and 15 frames after. Samsung followed along with that. They say Samsung's next phone, you press it once, it'll take a picture, but you got to press it real quick. You press and hold, and it takes video, as long as you hold your finger down. So I think this line between video and photos is slowly going to disappear. And lastly, the biggest major change we're going to see in the next 5 years is the adoption of 5G. Qualcomm is going to deliver chips before the end of the year, they say, with 5G capability. And the beauty of it is that these radios and these chips are software-based. So regardless of whatever standard is endorsed, whatever standard happens, they're software-based. It also means you'll be able to take your Verizon phone, march it down the street, say, AT&T, I want to use your service. They reconfigure your radio. You're good to go. No more phone for this network, for that network, for the next network. 1 gigabit theoretical speed, that's the best case. Real world, they're saying anywhere from 300 to 600. Just think about having that kind of speed in your hand at all times. You know, what am I going to do with it? Well, why would you need a home connection if you got that kind of speed on your phone? Why doesn't it become your home connection? You know, you can get four full HD streams at 600 megabits. So it changes everything coming in the future. It makes things like the cloud a reality beyond anything we're currently thinking of. When we think of cloud and ambient computing, that wherever we go, there's going to be a computer or something, some computational intelligence out there. Everybody's putting it out into the cloud. I'm not so sure it's going to be out in the cloud. Now that we're going to have much faster phones, much more storage, faster connection rates, why can't it be in your pocket? Don't know what it's going to be, but whatever it is, it's going to be faster, it's going to be cheaper because it's ubiquitous, and people like Qualcomm are getting smart and building chips that are software-based radios. So now mobile virtualization, I'm going to talk just a little bit about that here. When you think about mobile virtualization, right now at my office in Austin, we've got Google Fiber, and it's a solid 1 gigabits 24/7. At the house, I've got Time Warner, the new Time Warner, they're still the old Time Warner, at 300 megabits. I have figured out that it's faster for me to run a VNC connection back to the office and pull off of that connection than it is all the latency of going to different websites. So now when I surf at home, I'm just copying a screen from my office computer, virtualization in that way. All of these guys, they're kind of sitting in the driver's seat at one aspect of fragmentation that we hear very little about, and that is the ability to run applications out of these services. Have you ever run an application out of Dropbox or Box or anything? Have you ever installed one in? I run about 30 applications out of Dropbox, and they're seamless across my devices. So when you install Dropbox, it knows it's on a phone, it knows it's on your laptop, it knows it's on an Apple, it knows it's on an Android. When you install whatever you install it in the same spot. I even ran my browser out of Dropbox for a while, but the cache was kind of hard to keep sunk. There's several places out there you can go to find what they call portable versions of software that are made to basically run off a USB stick. Well, if it'll run off a USB stick, it'll run off of any of these drive services. What that does is it sets these guys up to run some kind of operating system right out of their Dropbox, their services. They can be the new OS, and it's seamless because they know what machine it's on. Another kind of side fragmentation that's occurring are these new docks. Microsoft put out Microsoft Continuum there on the left. It's that little black box on the left. It basically turns your desktop, your phone, into a desktop. And Microsoft has nailed it. I'll talk a bit more about that in just a second. Samsung's new machine is out and it's very good as well. Continuum from Microsoft is beautiful because it's Windows 10. I mean, it's Windows 10 on your phone, it's Windows 10 on your laptop, it's Windows 10 on, you plug it in, and there it is on your screen, it's Windows 10. But it's all driven from your phone. And it's ubiquitous, it's across the entire set of Microsoft hardware and platform, and there's no screen scaling problems. I mean, they nailed it. Unfortunately, nobody cares because it's Microsoft. Come on, click. There we go. Whereas Samsung's new Samsung DeX, I love it. I've got a S8 is what I use, and I've got a DeX that I use, one at home and one at the office. And you just plug it in, and it's beautiful. It looks like a desktop there, and you run every Android application, and you manage your phone, and it's clearly a hint of where they're going to go with this stuff. And Samsung says they're going to throw a lot of money on it. Whether they do or not is yet to be seen. Apparently, according to reports, they've sold about 500,000 of these so far. Not mass adoption, but that's pretty good. That gives them incentive to keep working on it. So, meanwhile, Microsoft Continuum, like I said, John Dvorak said it best in ZDNet. He said they finally had a great idea and nobody cares, you know, because it's all based on their phone. It's all based on the Lumia phone, which is just all but dead. You know, it's got one foot in the grave, and Microsoft phone has one foot in the grave. But it's a beautiful thing, and it's too bad it never took off. So that's another picture of it. So talking about these docks and being able to go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, I try and explain this to people. I've been doing this presentation now for about 4 months. Related to unified computing, as we try to call it, because you get the same experience on the phone that you do on the desktop to anything, regardless of what you're using. I mean, this is Microsoft DeX here. It just looks like a start menu there, and it throws it up, and it's just beautiful. It runs all the Android apps. It runs Word, everything. Excuse me. When we think about what we do on these devices, we all want to do about the same thing, and there's no reason they can't be done powered by a phone. You know, Steve Jobs, when they introduced the iPad, he said, this is the end of the desktop era. Well, he had the right idea, he had the wrong device. This is the device that's going to end the desktop era. With the phone, you've got apps everywhere that do everything. They're optimized, they're single task, they're bulletproof, they're secure, they're easy to understand. Swiping, it's universal. I've got a large Samsung TV at home, and the casting, the screen casting from the phone is crystal clear. It's perfect. It's bulletproof. No lost frames, no nothing. There's an app out now that you can automatically turn it on and just go like this, and it goes from your phone up to your TV set. And it's just amazing. Within 5 years, there's no reason that can't be everywhere, every screen. Set your phone down next to a desktop and flick it up there. Why would you have to have a desktop computer anymore? Beauty of the phone is peripheral compatibility runs everywhere because it is your phone and it's simple to plug in. Security is better because it's all based on the biosensors, you know, your fingerprint, your iris scan. And lastly, 5G is going to enable us to do a ton of things that we just can't even imagine. I mean, think back when the iPhone came out 10 years ago. Things like Uber, all of these apps we use on a nonstop basis, even Facebook to a degree. I wonder if Facebook would have tipped the way it's tipped without the app. What's going to happen when we have this much more speed in our pocket, that much more computing power, storage power? Why would we have to have computers stuck around everywhere? Why can't this just be the computer? We know it's going to get faster, stronger. It's going to do everything we want. I edited several videos on the multi-gigabyte videos on here the other night. I did it on my desktop. I did it on the phone, or on DeX, Samsung DeX. So I think the reality of 5G, it gives us a whole new paradigm. As different as this is from what the iPhone brought about, this is to where we are now. So when we look about the amount of time that people spend in apps, on the left is Twitter, on the right is Twitter, on the left is Facebook, the dark blue. I threw that up there to show you that people just continue to increase the amount of time they want to spend in an app. Now, do they want to spend that in an app on the phone, or do they want to spend that in an app on a bigger screen, on a laptop, on a tablet? It's very, very important to these social services. So another thing that's coming along rapidly is translation, speech-to-speech translation. I've seen a demonstration of this now where literally there are two people. One was talking Italian, one was talking Spanish, and it was crystal clear. Hi, hello, translated it. That guy said something, translated it, and it was near perfect. They're getting so good at that stuff. And part of that is these machine language learning algorithms that they're putting out there. Kind of breaks down a whole bunch of barriers that are out there now between us simply because of language. Imagine where you can be when you go roaming around Europe without a translator. So flexible displays, they've been talking about them for quite a few years. They run into quite a few manufacturing problems, and they're not holding up. Probably the one that's the most interesting right now is this one. You have your normal display, and then you just push out a further display if you want, pop double the size of the screen and then put it back in to protect it. But they've got bendable displays now. Is somebody going to figure out a way to get them into mass market? Not sure. Things like wideband phones, that's already come to pass. Amazing technology. How they apply it, I don't know. Everybody wants to talk about it, though, in these talks, so I included it for completeness. So we just heard about VR and the beauty of augmented reality. I was in Vegas last week at a conference, and we did the new wheel, the observation, don't call it a Ferris wheel. And they had an app where you can just hold it up and they'll tell you what you're looking at around Vegas. It's like the Skyview app where you hold it up and see what stars you're looking at. So clearly augmented reality is going to grow and grow and grow. And part of the augmented reality is why it's driven this bezel-less designs on these phones to get rid of the bezel. With the massive amounts of storage we'll have available, things like Google Glass and Snapchat goggles, why wouldn't you leave them on all the time? I mean, there's people out there that want to do that. So we were on conferences, and I'll go to a conference in Vegas, and I'll spend 5 days there, and I will talk to literally 1,000 people. And I can't remember what I talked to about, 3 years later, they'll go, remember we talked about that one website? No. But I got one of those little cameras that takes a picture. It's basically like a cop cam that takes a picture every 5 minutes so that I can remember who I talked to. So I'd love to be able to record my life. And I'm sure a lot of people will be too. The mass storage and mass bandwidth of wireless gives us that opportunity. I talked a little bit about the growth of embedded devices. If you're not tuning into what's going on in the medical fields, try and read up. It's not hitting the mainstream news, but the breakthroughs in medical devices right now is fantastic. I know a good friend of a friend who works at Google. His wife died of cancer, and they spent $2.5 million in a losing battle against cancer. Well, he went to work for a company called Grail, and they have determined by analyzing over 1 million blood samples that there are 30 markers that can indicate cancer in a patient long before they even know where it's at in the body. They can detect it simply from a blood screening. Blood screening is about $1,000, and everybody was complaining that it was $1,000. He says, well, I lost a battle for $2.5 million. Here's a test for $1,000. Which would you rather pay? So the changes coming in the medical field are profound. Even in my own life, my wife has a spinal cord stimulator. They insert it in the spinal cord. It's a little, about the size of a $50 inserted under the skin, just below her belt line. It's got a battery on it and stimulates the spinal cord because she has lower back pain. And so it nullifies the lower back pain for a while. She had it put in 10 years ago already. She just had it replaced in January, and it dropped down to about the size of a quarter. She used to have to charge it with an inductive charging belt twice a week. This one is supposed to last for 7 years on the original battery. So changes are coming rapidly in medical field. Augmented reality, no reason surgeries, as we saw from the previous presentation, that it's clearly going to happen more and more. Brain input on the computer. Everybody wants to talk about it. There have been few breakthroughs here and there. You know, we've got some rudimentary devices out there that don't work very well, but they're kind of prototypes to show the public that that is coming. Facebook has reportedly spent anywhere from $50 to $100 million on research on brain control of computers. Part of that's along with their research into VR, but they just put Regina Dugan in charge of it. Just outstanding. If you've ever seen her stuff, she's just a brilliant woman now in charge of it. Of course, Elon has thrown a lot of money at AI and brain input, all kinds of money. I think they've got like 18 different startups he's invested in related to brain control, and he called it the Cerebro play. So I love Elon. I mean, everything the Apple fanboys talk about Jobs, that's me about Elon. So. Now, on the downside, some of the new stuff coming out is not real user-friendly. If you were reading the news last week, a company announced that they were able to detect a person's sexual orientation from a picture of them with 80% accuracy. First off, who knew that that was even possible? But an AI algorithm figured it out from people's self-reported sexual orientation on the romance sites, the dating sites. 80% accurate. Human beings are only about 55% accurate to be able to tell a person. Who knew this stuff? Now, the company's not going to release the app, but they told the world about it, so now everybody else who builds app is out running off trying to build the same thing, and clearly somebody else is gonna. But will they tell us they have? I don't know. When you walk into a mall, are you going to get scanned like Minority Report scanned you? Probably. That's going to happen. Biosensors in display is already happening, display ads. So near-term stuff that are coming, dumb terminals, you know, the big comeback. This was my computer in college in 83. That's what you used, the old DEC PDP-11 BT100 terminal. It was basically a dumb terminal. You talk to the mainframe. We don't call them a dumb terminal anymore. We call them Chromebooks. You know, what is a Chromebook but a dumb terminal, modern Chromebook. They don't have a lot of intelligence in them, but they are getting smarter. Massive push into schools by Google, both on Chrome and with Google Docs. Android Nougat is getting a great upgrade to be able to use dual screens more seamlessly, so it more like a desktop experience with multi-monitor support. New apps coming out. Chrome OS is what they kind of talk about in terms of you visit a website, it has an app that downloads kind of in the background, JavaScript, it's got resources, graphics, other CSS that basically build it into an app, and you don't even have to install it. It's just there in your cache. That's kind of wrapped into this idea of a Chrome OS. Unfortunately, prices continue to creep upwards on Chrome. Chromebooks are up to $750 most places now for the top end ones. Cool thing, they're shrinking them down. Both Asus and LG now have these little sticks that you just plug in that are basically Chromebooks on a stick. You just plug it into an HDMI outlet. It's got Bluetooth on it, so you use your Bluetooth keyboard and your Bluetooth mouse. If that continues to shrink, why bother putting it on a stick? Why not just put it on your phone and have the exact same experience and have the functionality of your phone to boot? AI, everybody wants to talk AI, so I threw in a couple screens about AI. I'm lukewarm on AI, and part of that, you know, we're here in the in the Bitcoin bubble, and you wonder, are we in the Bitcoin bubble? Are we in the echo chamber? What do we know about Bitcoin? Is this what the general public thinks? Is there a mass adoption right around the corner? Or do we think it's great and it's cool and it's the thing to be into because all our friends are into it? And because everything we read is about the bubble. Well, right now I think there's a bubble in AI. Nobody has come out with anything new really about AI except for talk. That's all they want to talk about. Last week, in fact, Jeffrey Hinton, he wrote the famous paper in the 80s that kind of laid out how we use neural nets, how AI is used in neural nets. And he said, my view is we need to throw it all away and start over again. Science progresses one funeral at a time. It's a beautiful, beautiful quote, which even as good a quote as that is, he followed it up with a better one. He said, the future depends on some graduate student who is deeply suspicious of everything I've ever said. I think that's a beautiful summation of somebody who knows what is going on in the AI business. Obviously, there's a ton of money going on into it. They're going to continue to research. Google, they say, has anywhere from 600,000 to 1 million boxes around the world. If they can't figure out quite how to make money off this, how to find a killer application for it, who can? You know, they've got the best and the brightest Stanford out there. I don't see any great breakthrough in AI in the next 5 years. Maybe I'm naive. I've looked at it and looked at it and looked at it. To me, it just sounds like better, faster computer programs. So, lastly, if you're watching today, Google bought HTC for $1 billion plus. Theory is, most of the reporting on it is that Google wants to make a better phone. They want to increase the value of the Pixel, the quality of the Pixel, add stuff to it. But it's a major play on Google's part to get back into the hardware business. On the other hand, Google's kind of a one-trick pony. They got the search engine. Yeah, they kind of got Android, but they make no money off of Android other than apps. The App Store is the only place they make money, and the distribution of, media. So, I don't know. You know, you look back at Google, and it's a graveyard of about 24 major services they've laid to rest, including their last hardware purchase, Motorola. So whether that pans out, I'm not so sure. It'll be interesting, that's for sure. It'll be interesting. So, lastly, here's a nice chart of HTC. Why did they sell? Why did HTC sell? Well, that's their market share. They're the ones going down and down and down and down and down. So kind of makes sense why they decided to sell today. So that's all I got. My next big thing is PUBCON Las Vegas, second week in November. So I hope you can join us. And we got time for a few questions. Yeah, we do. Okay. Got any questions? I'm good to go. Hey, how you doing?
So since this weekend is about blockchain, what of these technologies that we've been talking about are at the greatest threat from blockchain?
Greatest threat? Oh, I thought you were going with what's the greatest enabler of blockchain technology. Greatest threat. You know, I don't see a greatest threat because this is about the hardware, and blockchain tends to impact the way we see it impacting services and established institutions, processes.
About cloud computing and
To a degree, especially with encryption,
Google search and all that.
Well, I don't see it impacting Google search. Google is so ubiquitous. They got a monopoly. They know they got a monopoly, and they don't have to worry about having a monopoly, except in Europe. So, but to the second part of that question, how do I see it impacting, enabling blockchain? Anybody watch Silicon Valley on HBO? There was the theory put out, well, why don't we just turn all cell phones into this giant operating system? Well, why don't they? Why doesn't somebody come up with a way to turn these into a giant operating system? Why can't Bitcoin and blockchain technology be driven by a network of phones? Now you're not worried about having 1 million boxes like Google. Now you got 300 million phones at your disposal in the United States and 2 billion plus around the world of modern phones, not just feature phones. So that's how I see it. I think somebody's going to figure out an app to do that, to manage and to monetize that. So, sir?
So what do you think about the decentralized social media plays that are now made possible with the blockchain? Is that going to be something important?
No. I don't see it being important. They're so entrenched right now. Facebook is. It's just so entrenched. It has become the orientation of families. Will there be niche plays? Yeah. The way we view Snapchat is kind of a niche play. There will be niche plays out there. There will be many more pop-up going on and on and on. We went through Friendster, we went through MySpace, we went through Google+, and now we're on to Facebook. And Facebook has legs. It's got long-term legs. People are putting their lives on Facebook. So it's not going away anytime soon. Whereas Snapchat, it's still kind of transitory. Whether it survives or not, I'm not so sure. Blockchain stuff, the biggest problem with the old platforms and social networks, like I used to run, the forums, the online communities. The biggest problem from them to what Facebook brought us was identity. Once you get into blockchain and crypto and social networks popping up, does that identity follow? You know, it's like the difference between Second Life that used to be and what Facebook is trying to do with social media VR. Second Life had no identity attached to it. The new ones have identity attached to them, and that's the single largest barrier to adoption is identity. Yet at the same time, people want the privacy. So I just don't see blockchain being a big player in the social networks.
Kevin Kelly's book, The Inevitable, was the first time I heard the concept of the future he forecast by 2030, potentially, that AI and quantum computing eliminates white-collar jobs and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Oh, it's going to eliminate jobs very soon, within the next 5 years. And it's not just AI, you know, self-driving cars. You know, you look at the entire shipping industry could be displaced by AI. There's just job after job after job that's going to be able to be displaced. And it's not because of AI, it's just because of natural learning programs that have been trained. So, anybody else? Last call. You Bronco fans, remember, just buy me a beer at the bar and we'll talk. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.